I'm really not a fan of this teetotaling trend in Gen Z. We've discussed this before. Gen Z is drinking alcohol at lower rates than every adult generation prior to them. And people have brought this up as something to celebrate. I disagree because they are not drinking for all the wrong reasons. They haven't made some kind of moral stand. It's not a sobriety movement. It's really just a movement away from other people. And I saw this viral post over the weekend about this new trend. Why did Gen Z quit drinking alcohol? It got a huge response, and here were some of the explanations they came up with, which I also don't buy. The first one being abusive parents. I don't know if that makes any sense. Are we going to claim that Gen Z specifically had alcoholic parents at a higher rate than prior generations? If anything, it would be the opposite. And then I saw another reply say, alcohol is bad for you, tastes like shit, and is only really good in social events. The last part is pretty juicy. It's only good in social events. I thought that's what it was for, actually. You're not supposed to sit at home alone drinking your sorrows away. It is actually meant for moments when you're enjoying yourself with other people. And that's really the crux of the issue. Gen Z has completely forfeited social gatherings and embraced bed rotting, doom scrolling, and basically total solipsism.
Yeah.
That's the reason why they've moved away from drinking and social drugs toward other drugs like internet dopamine. They are ripping THC pens in their bedrooms. They're watching pornography. They're on SSRIs of all different scripts. And it's all replacement drugs.
I mean,
They're
that's what
not
happened-
sober.
That's what happened to me, right? Like I was never a big drinker, but I did plenty of drugs and I did them by myself. So depending on your personality type, and that is, I lean that direction. Luckily, building new habits and hobbies outside of just skating, like building up new like neural pathways has allowed me to kind of move past that and be more social again. Getting engaged also helped with that a lot too. But my natural inclination has always been towards being more isolated. And certain drugs definitely lean you into that more. Luckily, I was never a drinker. If I had been, that's even worse. Like something, maybe it was actually like the social stigma. Like it bypassed my brain that the stuff I was doing was also wrong. But somehow the idea of like drinking alone just felt even worse to me.
Yeah, I don't even understand the appeal of that.
Yeah.
It is, in my mind, something that you only engage with when you're with other people. Not because you need it to like make people tolerable to you. It just enhances a social environment. And there's nothing wrong with that inherently. As for the health concerns, I don't believe for a second that Gen Z is more health conscious than other generations.
I mean, okay, I don't know. I don't necessarily know if I agree with that. So these days, think about it like 20 years ago. It wasn't until like, somebody can correct me on the year, but it was within the last 3 to 5 years where water finally became the #1 drink in America over soda. Soda for decades and decades was the #1 drink that everyone like. And I watch old movies and television shows and characters are just casually drinking soda. You don't really see that much anymore. It's mostly water. I do think that as time has gone on, I think there's also the other perspective would be they know that they're eating unhealthy and then they blame the system where they're like, I can't afford to go to the grocery store and buy healthy food. Therefore, oh no, I just have to eat junk all the time.
Well, that just means they're more likely to still be unhealthy,
Yes.
but not take accountability for it.
But I do think that there's at the very least, there's a push towards healthier living that feels more spearheaded by millennials than like older millennials than Gen Z.
Yeah, I would agree
Or,
with that.
I'm sorry, younger millennials than Gen Z.
You mean the ones who are closer in age to Gen Z, but not quite?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Like, for the most part, you didn't really hear much talk about healthy food and drink. Like, I don't ever remember when I was growing up, like, drink this much water a day. Maybe they did say that, but I don't ever remember anyone saying that. It was drink milk.
But that was because of big
It was propaganda. Did you see all those ads?
Well, it
Got
was
milk?
actually subsidized by the government, yeah. And I saw these viral tweets around the same time. Zoomers aren't drinking. Zoomers aren't dancing. They aren't even having sex. Worst of all, they aren't reading either. In fact, it's entirely unclear what they do with the same 24 hours their ancestors had to deal with every day. All we know is that everyone hates themselves and that ByteDance stock is up. We have no idea what the interior lives are of these young people or what their hobbies include. I was rewatching Clueless the other night. And of course, this is somewhat unrealistic, but you're seeing a room full of teenage characters at a house party. Mm-hmm. Not a phone in sight. It was 1995.
Yes.
And
they had cell phones in the cover of the movie. They had cell phones.
It was just not, a smartphone. And they were dancing and drinking and having fun. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure that's more realistic in the setting of LA in 1990, like Beverly Hills in 1995.
That was happening when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And there was phones, but we didn't have smartphones.
Yeah. And that does not happen anymore. It's not something that Gen Z takes any interest in. And I really think it's that they have this
there was a
solipsistic attitude.
There was also a sense of safety around that behavior back then where you could act out and it wasn't going to be caught on camera and become some viral moment that ruined your life. So we did and said plenty of stuff that would have got us in a lot of trouble when we were growing up. And it's not like I acted out when I was in high school. For the most part, at that time, skating was in its own, like there was plenty of kids that were coming up at that time that were like straight edge without calling themselves that, meaning like they didn't claim the label. They just thought it was lame. And that was a behavior that I took for the most part through most of high school. Like I don't think I started drinking until senior year. I think it was the first time I went out and did anything like that.
Was that late among your circles?
Yeah. Most of them were starting in like sophomore. But that's because I was skating full time. I was constantly, like I never did anything other than skating at that time. Like it's actually hard to explain just how divided my life was into like skating all the way up through when I quit sponsors to then just kind of living a regular life. Nothing else mattered. So my social experience was a little bit different. Then I did do all that stuff later on when we would go on tour and we'd travel and we'd go, you'd go travel in an RV through towns and hang out with the locals, party with them, skate, and then go to the next town and stuff like that. But there was just less fear that you were going to get in trouble for doing something stupid because people weren't constantly wondering about what stupid things they could get in trouble for. Yeah. You were just living your life.
Yeah. It's like Gen Z rightly feels that there are higher risks in those behaviors. However, that's not to discount the fact that they're less interested in other people than themselves. Like, I've noticed this whole, I guess it's kind of a collective attitude that's arisen over recent years where people hate small talk. And they hate, like, very normal facets of just, like, our fabric of life. Things that used to be commonly accepted and enjoyed. Are not there's just a disdain for it, and there's a disdain for any behavior that takes any interest in someone other than yourself.
I think it has a lot to do with skits online, and they satirize those types
so cynical.
So I loved that part of like when I worked at gas stations. I loved the social contract of small talk in that environment. Mainly because there was like a guaranteed beginning time and a guaranteed end time. Meaning like both parties know when this conversation has dragged on too long. Sure. Whereas in the real world, that's not necessarily as easily discernible. But in general, anything you used to do that used to be some type of way that you connected with another human being is turned into cynical skits online.
Yeah.
Your any type of earnest human communication is then satirized from people who are terrified of being vulnerable in any way.
See, the antisocial pattern in Gen Z has such a complex web of explanations. It's almost too big to tackle and explain in one go. But I would say that's not to discount it as a huge problem, and I don't think that they should be praised for it. Another tweet I saw recently said, "Going to the club is such a disaster for Zoomers. None of them dance or smoke cigarettes. They just stand there and vape into their shirts and don't talk to anyone they didn't come with. It's giving middle school dance. One girl asked me for a cigarette because she asked a bunch of guys and none of them had any. She said, 'I think they're all gay.'" There's just a resistance to talking to adults. Gen Z still sees themselves as children, and they're afraid of talking to grown-ups.
It's only going to get worse too, because millennials still have a hard time seeing themselves as adults, because they constantly bemoan the fact that they're it's like what happened.
And like millennials on the other side of the coin love drinking, right?
Do they still? Now, no.
We were
talking about before the show about hating the idea of the millennial. I'll stay home. I'm too tired to go out. I always rolled my eyes at, because it was the LOL, so random. I'm so different from everybody else. He he he. Mm-hmm. Not really, because every other millennial seemed to be like that.
Thank you.
We're speaking in broad generalizations, of course.
Yeah, one of my favorite mutuals on Twitter, Inez Stepman, has made this her personal crusade. I love that this is her thing now, but she's just constantly counter-signaling that exact attitude. The jokes that millennials make about canceling plans to take a nap and just generally being a self-involved person who goes to bed at 8 p.m. and scrolls for 5 hours.
I wonder if for millennials, I'm wondering if for millennials, the divide or this disconnect and why they have a hard time feeling like adults is because a lot of prior generations' definition of finally becoming adults was becoming parents and then owning a home. And since they were never able to own a home, somehow they felt like they were caught in this cycle of consistent childhood, right? They never owned a home, therefore they were never the same type of adult that their parents were.
I don't know if I agree with that.
All the people that I know that are adults
that really seems like a reductive explanation.
Obviously I'm not saying that there's only one answer here, but I'm saying that a bunch of different things would have to come together and make millennials wonder why they don't feel like the adults their parents did at that age.
You mean Gen Z?
No, I'm talking about millennials, because we were talking about millennials going to bed early and stuff like that. And I just wonder if the reason millennials never felt like they grew up, because they do feel like they were, constantly in a state of consistent nostalgia. I don't think of millennials as talking about being the grown-ups in the room. If anything, they want to be permanently children.
Yeah, I want to know what's behind this specific trend, though. Bragging about how much you sleep, being tired, bragging about canceling plans, and lying to your friends about it because you're lazy and tired, going to bed early. Why is there a subculture around that?
The line.
What is wrong with these people?
I can answer the question about why they cancel plans. If you're doing a bunch of drugs and you agree to plans when you're in a good mood, and then your mood is completely changed when the plans come up, and then suddenly you're not in the mood anymore.
I've never had that.
You don't do drugs.
But people who don't do drugs talk about that all the time. I don't understand
then they're emotionally dysregulated.
It's
Same
so
as Justin
weird.
Bieber.
You will just be glad that you went. So be an adult and go. You need to leave the house sometimes.
There was one time when we were Olivia's like, I don't want to go do anything. I'm like, let's go bowling. Let's go to like the arcade, or
Whatever,
it was like 10 p.m. Like, I understand why it's like 10 p.m. I'm like, let's just go do something. Clearly, it was one of those times where it's like you got home from running errands at an odd time, meaning like it's too early to it's too early to stay in, but it's too late to want to go and make plans. I'm like, let's just go do something. You won't regret it. And then when we were done, she's like, thank you for getting me to leave the house. I'm like, yeah, we would have been miserable sitting at home for another 2 hours. Like, if we hadn't done that, we would have done something around, like we would have cleaned or done something around the house for the sake of not sitting around for the extra 2 hours.
The whole canceling plans culture is not just deeply inconsiderate of other people's time, but it's also just worse for you and your own self-interest and your own happiness.
I saw let me check something here. I literally just saw a tweet and reposted it the other day that is related to this at least a little bit. Let me see if I can find
people bragging about canceling plans.
It was it's like, does that show up here? Yeah, it was this one right here. I reposted this. It took me 13 years to realize the only cure to depression is to just leave the house at every single possible opportunity, no matter how badly you don't want to. An inelegant solution, but a solution nonetheless.
Yeah. Just do things that are uncomfortable.
Get out of the house.
This is the problem. I think this is the problem. That people in general, but especially the most recent adults being Gen Z, want everything to be so comfortable and just streamlined.
Yes. No, it is. It has to do with technology. Like,
is it that?
They don't even know how to use computers anymore because they're used to their phone, right?
It's just, I try to talk to like people who are only slightly younger than me, and I'm like, what
it's not
species are you?
Okay, so I was driving. This literally happened just as I was driving into work today. So I was driving into work today, and I had one of those moments where, if you're a millennial and you've seen a certain movie, and you know all the trees that are all the logs that are tied to the bed of the truck, and you don't want them to come out and hit you in the back. Well, there was one of that, and then I got around it, and there was another truck in front of it. It was like a truck full of dirt and gravel, and I was looking at the back of the truck and the way that the bed of the truck was constructed, and I realized that because it's full size, it's a rig. I was like, I would have no clue how to open the rig of the back of this truck, because it's not just a single latch that you open and pull down. And I think what happens is society has become so streamlined now that anytime you have to do something that's even the slightest bit outside of your realm of understanding, you start to panic.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, it's not, okay. I want to use this term that, I don't remember the first place I heard it or who coined this phrase. I should find out where it came from. But this term called an inner citadel. Have you heard of it? Okay, so when someone builds an inner citadel, they are training themselves not to want something that they believe they can't have, or something they actually can't have. So if you are an amputee and you have one leg, it's like you're training yourself to believe like, oh yeah, having one leg is like better than having two legs anyway. Like, I love having one leg. Like, you two-leg havers just don't know what you're missing out on. It's sort of, it can be useful in some situations to make life tolerable, but in most cases, you're actually having you're justifying a self-limiting belief. And it happens a lot with socialization. Like, people are saying like, oh, like bars suck. Like, I hate like going out and drinking. That sucks. Even though you're just telling yourself that because it makes you anxious to be around people.
Yeah. And
it shouldn't. And you need to expose yourself to those situations and get used to it. But you're protecting yourself from that experience and that encounter with people by telling yourself that you have some kind of like moral grandstanding objection to it.
You were the one who told me that you had to like get yourself out of your comfort zone at a specific point.
That's absolutely something that Gen Z needs to do, because they are the most anxious adults alive today.
I went to like several movies alone, like last summer and stuff like that, which is weird because I spend a lot of time alone. I skate alone all the time, but movies were not something that I ever did alone. I guess it was 2 summers ago now, and I found it to be quite an enjoyable experience, mainly because I could go during the day. It was like on the weekends, go for like matinees. Not only was it cheaper, but also like no one was there.
I like doing that too.
But it was like doing that on my own was kind of
There
that
is
in a way.
nothing I love more. This has nothing to do with alcohol or even like talking to people, but you need to leave the house. Nothing I enjoy more lately than just going to a coffee shop and writing on paper. Like, it's just such a normal, tactile thing to do that's like slow moving and no one is trying to reach me.
Yeah.
It's great.
And like I always said, like from the moment you like we started working together, I was always shocked how like you would just like not bring your phone everywhere. Like that's not common amongst your generation.
Yeah. Or just like you can stand in line while you're waiting for something and not look at your phone. You can like sit in the TSA line and not look at your phone.
Thanks for watching. Listen to full episodes of Pop Culture Crisis on Spotify.
Keep up with us on social media and make sure you subscribe and ring that bell so you never miss the show. Bye, guys.